I'm Pastor Bob. This is my friend Gio.
Hey, everybody.
This is a conversation called The Messy Disciples. These are Zoom conversations that we thought would be fun to post and get people to interact with about life, about God, about how to follow Jesus. We hope you enjoy the conversation.
So, all this continuing stuff that is going on day to day, I think people are getting more and more confused, and I think we're still traveling toward a direction where it's going to still continue to get more confusing too. I think we're not, I don't think we're out of the woods at all in this. I think we've got a long way to go, if you will. And I think we're going to see things manifest themselves in different ways. So I get to thinking, I get to talking with some of my people in my circle, and the more I talk about Jesus, it's interesting the conversations that arise. It's interesting to see the kinds of things that happen. And some of my Christian buddies, we had a great conversation about it the other day, and it keeps rearing its head in these different forms, right? Evil keeps rearing its head in different forms. We have. I think that there's a lot of people on the planet that really need to get to know Jesus and the stories of the Bible so that they can understand. We say this in a lot of our videos, but all this stuff has really happened before. We're not going through anything that hasn't happened before. Different game pieces, right? Different pieces of the game, but the game's all the same. It repeats itself, and humans really aren't that interesting. So we don't really come up with that much new stuff. We just cycle through, battling our emotions. And then in that transaction, that interaction, out of it came this. And we, one of the guys that was in the group decided that he wanted to, reveal something to me personal. And so, he came out and he said, listen, he goes, I have had a lot of trials and tribulations in my life. And there's a lot of, pain that I've gone through, and I've suffered a lot, and I've gone through, many different phases of trying, just struggling, trying to make it, just trying to, make it every day. And then all of a sudden, and so he told me, how he got out of it by, in the Word. And he said that, in the Word, what he found that these, there's a constant battle going on inside of all of us every day. And, we're from especially being men too, we have a libido that is like in the on position all the time, I think, until we hit like 65. So desires of the flesh, adultery and all these things that, listen, everybody deals with them. Everybody deals with them. In the story we saw in the book last week that we talked about, in the Year of Living Biblically, what are the chances that the guy goes up to the other guy and he's an adulterer? I mean, it's pretty obviously the chances are pretty good, right? So, this kind of idea that that we're repeating ourselves could be helpful. It could be helpful for us to be able to see how Jesus helped to combat these things, and what he says in the Word is to be kind to each other. And to pop back in, we're seeing, that this constant valuation between this argument between good and bad inside of us, that yin and yang, or that, good versus evil. And the concept came up, the idea came up, and this is what I wanted to ask you about, Pastor Bob. The idea came up that, there is evil in this world as much as there is good, and God created everything. So God created the good, and he also created the bad. And the question was Satan maybe in control of the bad? And then are we creatures of light that were given a soul and put inside this flesh vehicle, but is that vehicle commanded by Satan? And is that why we have these back and forths and these constant battles in and out and in and out? And so that's where I'd like to drop you in, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk about the two different things that are related to one another. The first I want to talk about is the world being full of good and bad. Now listen, in the book of Genesis, the way that God presents the creation story is he created everything and it was good. The problem was is that we took the good because Satan had tempted us and we had fallen for it, and we wanted to be God and Satan wanted to be in charge. And we took that which was good and we made it bad. Now the question is, okay, so God's the author of good. We're the ones who messed it up. Well, how do we get back to good? That's where Jesus comes in, and Jesus reorients us back to the way that it should have been, and he does that inside of himself. And so when we're in Christ, all the good happens. And that's a lot of theology talk, and so I want to give an example. Are you ready for that? All right, so here's the example.
Sure.
Before I had kids, I hated driving 25 miles an hour. Like, actually, I not only hated it, I honestly willfully disobeyed that, because cars aren't, they're not made to go 25. I mean, no, the engineers were like, how can we make sure that peak performance is at 25 miles an hour? I knew that there was some sadistic judge out there who was giggling about, laughing about collecting ticket fines for 25 miles an hour, because no reasonable person wants to go 25 miles an hour. And so I hated going 25. I chafed that law. And even when I was next to a cop and it was 25, I'd go like 26, 27, just to show that he has to admit that this is ridiculous, right? And that's just the way that I related to it. That is until I had kids. And when I had kids, and when we live on a street, and there's a bunch of cars and a bunch of houses, listen, when I had kids, I not only celebrated 25 miles an hour, but I was pretty sure that if you're driving on my street, you should be going below 25 miles an hour. Because my kids are playing. It's not that I'm not watching them. It's just that, I'm scared and I care for them. And so, in fact, if you are on my street, you probably shouldn't be driving 25 miles an hour. You should probably just park your car at the end of my block, walk and do whatever business you need to do, and then go back to your car. And now that I have kids and I'm aware of that, actually, I'm always aware of 25 miles an hour. I mean, I don't do it perfectly. I still mess up. But whenever I'm over 25 and a 25 now, I feel guilty about it because I know it's wrong. Really, my whole relationship with my kids has changed my relationship to this rule, this law, this 25 miles an hour. And it's shown me the value of it. I'm not perfect at it, but I am very aware of it. And I think that's related to the good and the bad in the world. God set these rules, he set these laws, and they were good. And we became transgressors of it. And we don't actually like to do God's good. We don't like to enjoy it. We're pretty sure God's wrong about what's good, because the Bible lists a lot of things that are bad that, frankly, our flesh feels pretty good about. And so we think that maybe God's kind of sadistic about this, that maybe he set up all these laws in the Bible, like in A Year of Living Biblically, when he said it's impossible, you can't keep it, and it's true. Right. That maybe he's setting us up to fail, and maybe that's how God is. But the truth of the matter is our whole relationship to the goodness of God changes when we're in relationship to his son, to Jesus Christ. And in Jesus Christ, we can see that all of these were actually good. When we're in relationship with Jesus, our relationship to the rules, it changes, and we see the value in it. Now, it doesn't make us perfect, but we know it's there, and we know it's there for a good purpose. And oftentimes, the problem that we have in this world with good and bad is not something that exists in God. The problem that we have in this world about good and bad is that we end up calling something good that's actually bad. And we call something that's bad good. We get that.
We see that every single day in the media and with everything that's going on. And so that's what confuses people. And I think that actually even supports my main question, because that sounds pretty evil to me, deceiving people,
Yeah, absolutely. So we have this kind of pull inside of ourselves to reject God's way. And we also have this problem of naming a thing that's bad good and good bad. And all of that changes when your relationship to Jesus. And so God created good, but the world's full of bad. And the bad was from sin that was really, it was our doing. All right, you ready? That was the first one. You ready for the second one?
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, what did you think about that analogy?
I think it's appropriate. I mean, I think it's a preamble to what you're about to say.
Yeah.
You know, I could see where you're going with it. So go. I'm on board.
Yeah, I think one of the things that also ends up happening is our flesh, our nature is so geared towards wanting and doing bad that we tend to think the goal of our Christianity is to escape our fleshliness, and to only be spiritual. And we tend to think of spiritual things as only good things. But I think that gets a little
I don't
confusing
know that
too.
that's true. I don't know that that's true. I think there's some evil spirited things in this world too.
Oh, I agree. But I think there's even some things that we call spiritual and good that are actually bad.
Oh,
And I
really?
think that can be confusing, Like,
Like
for
what?
instance,
Yeah.
well, like one of the things is you can call like going to church all the time is good, right? But if you're going to church all the time and neglecting your family, you've just negated any good that church could have. And so you can use a spiritual thing for a bad purpose, right?
Interesting.
And so, yeah. So it gets really confusing. I think one of the things that ends up happening is, well, first, we were created good. And then sin made it bad. And then think of that as like a disease that infected us, right? And so now we act according to the symptoms of that disease. And by nature, we're filled with sin, which means we're selfish. But we already know this. Gio, even you already know this. Notice how you didn't have to teach your kids to do bad things.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they just naturally knew how to do it. But what do you have to teach your kids to do?
Do good. Yeah.
By nature, we have this problem.
Right.
And so we say, okay, that's our flesh. We need to get rid of the flesh. Well, actually, there's a better solution, and that's to redeem the flesh. That is to buy it back from sin and put it back into good. The person who did that was Jesus. See, if we're by nature sinful, then Jesus came, lived in our nature, didn't fall for any sin, even died, because remember, the consequence of bad is death. Any form of bad is death. Death is not a friend. He even went through death, and then what did he do? He resurrected. Now, when he resurrected, it wasn't just spiritually. He didn't like resurrect as a phantasm. He's like, welcome to the spiritual existence. No, he sat down, he ate with them, he let them touch him. He's like, no, dude, check this out, and like stick their hands in his wounds. I don't know if they did, but he was like, if you need proof. And it wasn't a zombie apocalypse. He didn't start munching on their brains or anything like that, right? And so in Jesus, we see that our life is meant to be more than just spiritual or as spirits. We see that one of the things that he came to do is to resurrect the life that we lost and to bring it in good again. And so the goal in our spiritual walk is not to leave the flesh. Our goal is to have the flesh redeemed, which is only something that Jesus did. So let's use a practical example now. Say a marriage, all right? So say you're a guy or say you're a gal, and your flesh, your eye starts to wander, you're looking at another person, and you know that it's wrong, but you're married. What's the goal? To rip your eyes out? Well, I mean, that might be effective at stopping your eyes from sinning, but your flesh is still having a problem. The goal is to get into relationship with Jesus, to change your relationship towards that law of staying faithful to your spouse. And when you're in relationship with Jesus, when you experience his forgiveness and grace, then it makes you realize that that wasn't the right way to treat your spouse. The goal for your spouse was not to be an object of physical desire or affection, but the goal of your spouse was to be your partner, your helpmeet for life, and that they're a blessing to you. And pretty soon, as you start valuing your wife correctly and you learn the good that's inside of marriage and you're both working on it together because neither of us are perfect, then you start to say, I couldn't look at any other person. I couldn't look at another woman. I couldn't look at another man the way that I look at my spouse because they're God's perfect gift for me. I learn the good again and I live in that physical boundary and I rejoice under it. But it all happens when you get into relation to Jesus. Does that make any sense?
It does. I mean, you got there pretty quick. It's a convoluted topic because, going from having to live in the trenches of this, determining all of this evil that's around us and what is real and what is fake, and then actually being able to have the strength of self to be able to convert it, if you will, into something positive through the redemption of the flesh. I mean, it's a kind of a complex idea, I think, for the average person. So I'd like to maybe silo that down a little more. And let me ask. So somebody in the group that we were talking raised an interesting question and said, could conditions of the flesh or these temptations of the flesh, extend beyond the actual physical flesh? And I think what the question that was really being asked was more, what are our sins as humans, and how do we live with that, and how do we decipher? I mean, I know the answer, and the answer is in the Word, and you've told me that many times. I've seen it become true as when you understand it. But is there a way to make that more practical and applicable into current times, so that we can get an idea of what kinds of things can we as humans practice, maybe, or something along those lines?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're right. The answer, kind of the easy answer, is to say the Word, right? And that's always very good, and I'm never going to downplay that or minimize that. But there is a moment when we know that we're sinning, and you can see this if you raise children. You can see it in your children best, because your children are like little lawyers, right? Where, you know what I mean? Like they're making their case and they're pretty sure they're going to win.
They're pretty good at it.
Yeah, but there's a moment when you can catch them, and you can just look at them and you can say, "Come on," and they know they've been caught and they react accordingly. My daughters, they laugh when they know I've caught them, right? Like, I got you, So I think there's something innate inside of us that says, what you're doing is wrong. And what is that? That's God has written the law, his rules, on our hearts. It's not just something you're going to find in the Word, but we know deep down inside murdering a fool is bad, right? We know that by nature. We know that stealing is wrong. We know that taking somebody else's spouse or robbing them or cheating them out of something, we know that that's wrong. How do we know that's wrong apart from the Word? Because human societies have been creating laws about this since the beginning, apart from the Bible.
Right. It's not accepted among humans.
Right. And even if you can create some kind of exception, you kind of know that you're just playing fast and loose with it. There's something that God has put in all of nature, like natural laws, that he's put it in all of us to know, okay, this is bad. I need to stop. But here's the struggle, Gio. But our flesh also is prone to evil. And so there's a way in which we also know that doing bad stuff feels really good, right? And so we seek bad, but we keep it private, or we keep our motives hidden. And so we have this struggle, this tension inside of us. We know it's wrong, but gosh, wouldn't it be great? It's like the Spaceballs movie where he says, evil will always triumph because good is dumb, and so we're kind of struggling, with this little short man inside of us.
Well, I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't jump in here, for my own personal mission. But this is an example, Pastor Bob, in our ongoing conversation where I feel like this supports my idea that we are here, in some form of purgatory or some form of needing to prove ourselves. I mean, and maybe I'm wrong, but what I hear when I hear the things that you're saying are the importance of being able to choose and being able to know what to choose, or you've got all these different options of how you can react to something, or what comes next in every individual situation. And it seems also, here was something else that you didn't mention, but I think it plays in. You said all those things all feel good, but they're also typically, I've noticed, the ones that are the path of least resistance, like they're the easiest most of the time as well. So it's not only do they feel good, it's kind of like a combination drug. It's like, not only does it feel good, but I can get it fast. So it even plays in more into my theory that if we weren't given these commandments, if we and you made an interesting point just now about saying how humans have justified these items because we created laws against them. So it's and it continues to evolve even more and more in that direction every day that legislation is made. So it's a profound kind of statement where it seems to be an immutable, unarguable truth, and yet it's not widely accepted. But I think that this plays in more to why maybe we are here. And it's interesting because I heard some people say in the conversation I had, they talked about, when I mentioned that, they're like, God rewards you when you're good. And I've heard some controversy. You and I have talked about that a little bit too, about it being a reward based system. And I don't think that it is. I think the rewards come because you're doing something good, and it's better for everybody if you do it. And I think it's more of a natural progression. I do think that God looks kindly upon those of us that try to act in his way. And I think there's lots of examples of that, but I don't know. Take it from there. What do you think?
Well, I think, just to pick up on the last point, then I'll back up to the point before it. I think that God does reward us. He does bless us. I mean, he's not stiffing us, you know what I mean? And he's not putting it all on us like you have to reward yourself. I think that he's good that way. I think that sometimes the struggle is threefold. It's not the reward I wanted, so sometimes he rewards us. I prayed for patience, which means I don't want to have trouble, but he gives us patience and a lot of trouble to test it out. And we're like, no, that's not how I wanted to be blessed, right?
It's a great example. It's such a great example.
Well, and then the same time is, he does reward us, but he's never asking us, he's never looking at it like a Christmas list. Like, good, you did that. I'm definitely going to get that for you now, which makes it kind of hard. It's the good that he calls good, not the good that I'm calling good for myself. And then the third thing is sometimes the rewards can be difficult because, yes, he does give us blessings, but we do struggle a lot in this world. And sometimes the struggle and the difficulty and the temptation and the trial makes us actually resent the blessings that he's given us, because we want a life that's free of any hindrance or pain or suffering. And so if there's any suffering, we're like the 5-year-old at the birthday party. We're like, right, everybody go home.
Right.
And so that
speaks to being emotionally immature, and being faithfully immature as well. I mean, that's I believe that our society struggles with that, and I think also that could also be solved in Jesus. I think that there's a lot of information I think there that could help to that personality. And I agree with you. I think that that's one of our biggest challenges in society, and that's why that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be a part of this project, was to try to help people that are struggling with it. And I think that a lot of people are struggling with it. I think that it's way more common than anybody would admit. I don't think that it's something that people want to just say, hey, you know what, I have trouble with this, for whatever reason. And it goes back to our video, Fear, Loss, and Mushrooms, where Pastor Bob gives an amazing story about how most of that we just talked about, most of that intellectual, spiritual, emotional immaturity, comes from this pain that started earlier or at some point in our lives, and then mushrooms, blows up into a mushroom cloud. Um, and all of those things along the way are actually things that can be addressed
Mhm.
in the Lord.
Yeah, yeah, no, I really appreciate you saying that. I think that that's spot on. I want to get to your purgatory concept. It's something you and I have talked about quite a bit. Um, and I always think of purgatory like the DMV. You know, yeah, it's like the place between
Oh
places.
my gosh, that's so
Yeah,
good.
and
As a
so
side note, have you ever seen Defending Your Life? It's an old.
yes,
That is what rings to my head. If you've never seen it and you thought that joke was funny, then go watch the movie on it.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that this world has that kind of in between places kind of character, right? Is we all know, we all pine for the good that we know is possible, but was lost at the fall. So we're all pining for that. We know we were made to live forever. That's why we hate death and we work so hard to avoid dying. And we know that life was only supposed to be good. That's why we basically kill ourselves trying to make our life worth it now. You know what I mean? And so we're pining for this thing that was lost, but we're also trying to get to the place where we can have that again, which is heaven. And so this life is like that middle place where we're just kind of holding on to our ticket, and we're just hoping ours is the next number that's going to be called. Oh, please God, let it be the number. And I hope I got all my paperwork right.
The green alien in Toy Story sitting in the claw. It's the claw, the
The
claw.
claw. Yeah, 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 yeah. So that'd be a great place to splice that in. And so, yeah, yeah, that's good. And so I think our life has that kind of quality where, we're sitting there and we're just kind of, we're just hoping, and we're struggling, and there's good and there's bad, and at least we made it there. But here's the good news, that while we're sitting there, somebody sat down next to us, and he had we kind of look over at his ticket, and he has the next number being called up, and that's Jesus. And what he does is, when the number gets called, he hands us his number. And that's very gracious of him, because we were like Z47. We were like at the Las Vegas DMV, which is if you don't know, you have to make an appointment, because if you don't, it is 8 hours of your life to just sit there. And so, he hands us the next number called up, and we're like, that kind of grace is just incredible. And that changes us. And that changes our whole attitude towards the whole event. And so, as we're waiting in this kind of purgatory-esque kind of situation, we have been given a great gift. Ours is the next number. And that's very powerful. And you know what that kind of does? That kind of makes us trade our ticket with a person around us to help them go up. And that's the kind of pay it forward kind of thing.
Well, I
We've,
think that jumps in really nicely too, because I've noticed that the more I try to live in the Word, or the more that I try to be kind to others, or the more that I try to, in some way, stop myself from giving in to the things that that you aforementioned that we as humans already know are wrong. It's a constant battle. It's every day. But I do notice that when I do, in those days or those times when I achieve that, and I actually do connect with somebody, and create a friendly, you know build up instead of tear down moment.
yeah,
I actually noticed that it ends up working out good, because it's good for everyone, and I think that that's what everybody's kind of missing here, is that we as humans need to start acting in ways that are going to be good for everybody, like good for each other, good,
yeah,
start it there, and be good to each other. It just so happens that's exactly what Jesus says.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a good connection.
You know, it just so happens that
Yeah,
there's, I mean, how many examples are in the Bible, Pastor Bob, of that
yeah.
point? I'm be curious. Could you throw a number on it even?
I would have to Google it.
Okay, that's a good idea. I mean, there's got to be hundreds, if not thousands, of references
Yeah,
in the Bible on that point alone.
yeah,
So it begs that question, because we as humans have this ability to make decisions or choices for ourselves. We have this
mhm,
free will, if you will. Now that's also a questionable topic for, conversation another time, free will. But
Later time.
yeah, for later time. But having that free will, that choice, it really becomes so simple, where
Yeah.
it's you make a choice to be a certain way, and if I am making a choice and I'm making a choice to be a certain way and kind of, and you're doing that and the other person's doing it, then all of the rest of this goes away.
Yeah.
It's really so simple,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
I've heard it said, a friend of mine named Eric Herman, he kind of riffed off of something somebody else said, and he said, um, good beer is likely a mortal sin. And what he meant by that,
It's really funny.
yeah, what he meant by that is, nobody makes an idol of drippy, flat, awful beer like Schlitz or something like that, right? No offense to Schlitz, but nobody makes an idol of that. Nobody makes an idol of mold, and nobody makes an idol of lice, and nobody makes an idol of osteoporosis. Nobody does that. What do we make idols of? Things that are really awesome, you know, thunder and lightning and sun and all these kinds of things. And we make an idol of good beer, and we make an idol of a good job, and we make an idol of the good life, and we make an idol of the good wife, the trophy wife, and the good kids. We make all those idols. And the problem with that is that was our good. And God just has a completely different set of goods, that if you set your idols down and look at what his goods are, you could agree with him that those were actually the better, and those were the real good. And that's a constant struggle, because who doesn't like a good beer,
Right.
right? Thanks for watching today. It's been a great conversation. We'd love for you to be a part of the conversation, so go ahead and click subscribe. And if you hit the notification bar, it'll let you know when new videos are coming out, which is really important because all of our videos are about new and current events that are happening. If you have any questions, go ahead and contact me via email. It's great to have you a part of the conversation. Thanks for joining us. Bye.